He was dying in his father's arms, tiny, breathless, and fading fast. His mother had died giving him life, and now it seemed he would follow. But no one in the Cheyenne village could help him, until a prisoner, a white medicine woman, asked to try. What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about enemies, and about healing. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Wyoming Territory stretched endlessly under the pale autumn sun of 1876, its vast prairies painted in shades of amber and gold. The wind carried whispers of change, of conflict, of a world being torn apart by forces neither side could fully control. In the heart of this untamed land, the northern Cheyenne people fought desperately to preserve their way of life against the relentless tide of settlers and soldiers pushing westward. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan had never imagined she would find herself in such a place. 28 years old, with auburn hair that caught the light like copper wire and green eyes that held both determination and compassion, she had dedicated her life to the study of medicine in Boston. Her colleagues had warned her against accepting the position at Fort Kearny, but Elizabeth possessed a stubborn idealism that refused to acknowledge defeat. She believed that medicine could bridge the gap between cultures, that healing had no boundaries. How naive that belief seemed now, as she sat in the cramped wooden cell that had become her prison for the past 6 weeks. The Cheyenne War Party had attacked the small medical convoy she had been traveling with, killing the soldiers who escorted her and taking her captive. Elizabeth had expected death, had braced herself for it during those first terrifying hours. But death had not come. Instead, she found herself dragged across the prairie, bound and exhausted, until they reached this village hidden in a valley between rolling hills. The lodges stood in neat circles, smoke rising from their peaks into the clear sky. Children had stopped their play to stare at her, women had whispered behind their hands, and warriors had looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. She was kept in a small structure made of wooden poles and buffalo hide, guarded constantly by 2 young warriors who never spoke to her. They brought her food and water, simple fare that she forced herself to eat despite her fear. Elizabeth had learned their language during her medical studies, having treated several Cheyenne patients who had been brought to Boston by missionaries. She understood more than her captors realized, catching fragments of conversation that drifted through the hide walls of her prison. The village was in mourning. Their leader, a man called Thanka, which meant Great Cloud, had lost his wife during childbirth 3 days before Elizabeth's capture. The child, a son, had survived but had been weak and struggling since birth. The Cheyenne medicine man had done everything in his power, performing rituals and administering traditional remedies. But the infant's condition had not improved. The baby would cry ceaselessly, his small body racked with spasms, his breathing labored and irregular. Nothing brought him peace. Elizabeth had heard these cries during her captivity, the desperate wails of an infant in distress that pierced the quiet of the night and made her heart ache with professional frustration. She knew she could help. She had studied infant respiratory conditions extensively, had helped deliver dozens of babies in Boston, and understood the delicate balance required to keep a newborn alive. But she was a prisoner, a white woman among people who had every reason to hate her kind, and she had no way to offer her assistance without risking her life. On this particular morning, the 52nd day of her captivity by her careful count, Elizabeth sat on the hard ground of her prison and listened to the village stirring to life. The usual sounds of morning activity seemed muted, overlaid with a tension she could not quite identify. Then she heard it, the rapid conversation of several voices speaking urgently in Cheyenne. She pressed her ear against the hide wall, straining to understand. "The child is worse," one voice said, belonging to an older woman. "He has not breathed calmly through the entire night. Great Cloud has not slept. He sits with his son, watching him struggle for every breath. The medicine man says there is nothing more he can do," another voice replied, this one younger and filled with despair. "He says we must accept that the Great Spirit may call the child home to be with his mother." "Great Cloud will not accept this," the first voice said firmly. "He has already lost Hangwi Changnungpa, his beloved wife. To lose his son as well would destroy him completely." Elizabeth's hands trembled as she processed this information. The child was dying, and she possessed the knowledge that might save him. But how could she offer help when she was viewed as an enemy? How could she convince them to trust her when the very uniform of the soldiers who had escorted her represented oppression and violence to these people? The day wore on with agonizing slowness. Elizabeth paced the small confines of her prison, her mind racing through possible scenarios. She could hear the infant's cries growing weaker, more desperate, and each sound felt like a knife twisting in her chest. As a physician, she had taken an oath to heal, to preserve life wherever possible. That oath did not discriminate based on race or circumstance. The child was innocent, and he was suffering. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and crimson, Elizabeth made her decision. When one of her guards brought her evening meal, a wooden bowl containing dried meat and corn, she looked up at him and spoke in careful Cheyenne. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "I need to speak with your leader. I can help his son." The young warrior's eyes widened in surprise. He had not expected her to speak his language. For a long moment he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and left, the hide flap falling closed behind him. Elizabeth waited, her anxiety mounting with each passing moment. Had she made a terrible mistake? Would they view her offer as an insult? As arrogance from a white woman who presumed to know better than their own medicine man? She pressed her hands together to stop their shaking, and forced herself to breathe slowly, to remain calm. Nearly an hour passed before the hide flap opened again. This time, an older man entered, his face lined with age and wisdom. He wore traditional clothing decorated with intricate beadwork, and a medicine bundle hung from his belt. This was the medicine man, Elizabeth realized, the one who had been treating the infant without success. "You claim you can help the child," he said in Cheyenne, his voice grave and measured. "Why should we trust you? Your people bring only death and destruction to ours." Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. "I am not a soldier. I am a healer, a medicine woman of my people. I have dedicated my life to saving lives, not taking them. The child's suffering calls to me as a physician. I cannot stand by and do nothing when I might be able to help." The medicine man studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to peer into her very soul. "What knowledge do you possess that I do not?" "I have studied the illnesses of newborns extensively," Elizabeth explained, choosing her words carefully. "I have seen many children struggle to breathe as this one does. Sometimes their airways are blocked by fluid or membrane that must be cleared. Sometimes their bodies need assistance learning the rhythm of breathing. I have techniques, methods that might ease his suffering and allow him to breathe more calmly." "And if you fail?" the medicine man asked quietly. "If the child dies while under your care?" Elizabeth swallowed hard. "Then I will have done everything in my power to save him, and I will accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. But I believe I can help him. Please, let me try." The medicine man remained silent for several heartbeats, then nodded slowly. "I will speak with Great Cloud. He alone can make this decision." As the medicine man departed, Elizabeth felt the weight of what she had set in motion. She had gambled everything on this offer, on the desperate hope that a grieving father's love for his child would overcome his hatred for her people. She thought of her own family back in Boston, of her mother who had begged her not to go west, of her father who had supported her dreams despite his own fears. Would she ever see them again? The night deepened, and the village grew quiet. Elizabeth could not sleep, her mind too active with possibilities and fears. She went over everything she knew about infant respiratory distress, reviewing techniques and treatments in her head. She had no medical equipment, no instruments or medicines from her practice. She would have to rely on her hands, her knowledge, and her instincts. Dawn was breaking when the hide flap opened once more. The medicine man stood there, his expression somber. "Great Cloud has agreed to let you see his son. But know this, medicine woman of the whites, if you bring harm to the child, your death will not be quick or merciful." Elizabeth nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I understand. Take me to him." She was led through the awakening village, aware of the eyes that followed her every movement. Women stopped their morning tasks to watch. Children peered from behind their mothers, and warriors stood with hands resting on their weapons. The weight of their collective gaze pressed down on her, but she kept her head high and her steps steady. They brought her to the largest lodge in the village center. The medicine man pulled back the entrance flap and gestured for her to enter. Elizabeth ducked inside, her eyes taking a moment to adjust to the dim interior, lit only by a small fire in the center. And there, in the shadows at the back of the lodge, she saw him for the first time. Great Cloud sat cross-legged on a buffalo robe, his massive frame hunched over the tiny bundle in his arms. He was perhaps 30 years old, with strong, handsome features carved by grief and exhaustion. His long black hair hung loose around his shoulders, and his bare chest bore the marks of mourning, fresh cuts that had bled and dried. But it was his eyes that struck Elizabeth most profoundly, dark eyes that held an ocean of pain, yet still burned with fierce determination and love as he gazed down at his struggling son. The infant in his arms was frighteningly small, his tiny face contorted with distress as he fought for each breath. His skin had taken on a bluish tinge, and his small chest heaved with the effort of drawing air into his lungs. The sound of his labored breathing filled the lodge, a terrible rasping that spoke of airways in crisis. Great Cloud's eyes lifted to meet Elizabeth's, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Here was the leader of the people who had taken her captive, the warrior who had every reason to view her as an enemy. And yet, in his eyes, she saw something that transcended hatred and conflict. She saw the desperate love of a father willing to do anything to save his child. "You will help my son?" he asked in English, his voice rough with emotion and sleepless nights. His command of the language surprised her, though she knew many Cheyenne leaders had learned English through their interactions with traders and government officials. "I will do everything in my power," Elizabeth replied softly, taking a tentative step forward. "May I examine him?" Great Cloud hesitated for just a heartbeat, then slowly extended his arms, offering his most precious possession to a woman he had every reason to mistrust. Elizabeth approached carefully, her movements slow and deliberate. She knelt beside him and gently took the infant into her arms. The infant's tiny body felt impossibly fragile in Elizabeth's hands, his skin hot with fever and damp with perspiration. She cradled him gently, her trained eyes immediately assessing his condition as she moved closer to the fire's light. The child's breathing was severely compromised, each inhalation producing a distinctive stridor that indicated upper airway obstruction. His nostrils flared with each labored breath, and his small ribcage showed signs of retractions, the spaces between his ribs sinking inward with the effort of breathing. "How long has he been like this?" Elizabeth asked, her fingers carefully palpating the infant's neck and chest. "Since his birth 4 days ago," Great Cloud answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "But he grows worse with each passing hour. My wife, she died bringing him into this world. I cannot lose him too." The raw pain in his words made Elizabeth's heart constrict. She looked up at the grieving father, seeing past the warrior to the devastated man beneath. "What is his name?" Great Cloud's jaw tightened, emotion flickering across his strong features. "I have not yet given him a name. Among my people, we wait until we are certain the child will survive before the naming ceremony. I feared to name him, to give him that part of my heart, only to watch him slip away." Elizabeth felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was no time for sentiment. She needed to focus, to use every bit of her medical training to save this child's life. She turned her attention back to the infant, gently opening his mouth to examine his throat. Even in the firelight, she could see the problem. Thick mucus and what appeared to be remnants of amniotic membrane coated his airway, restricting the flow of air and causing the terrible breathing difficulties. "I need clean water, as hot as you can make it," Elizabeth said urgently, looking at the medicine man who had remained in the lodge, watching her every move. "And clean cloth, the softest you have. Also, I need a very small hollow reed, no thicker than my smallest finger, and it must be completely clean." The medicine man translated her requests to a woman waiting outside, and soon the items began to arrive. Elizabeth worked quickly but carefully, using strips of the soft cloth to fashion a makeshift swab. She dipped it in the hot water, then with infinite gentleness, began to clear the infant's mouth and throat of the accumulated mucus and debris. The baby struggled at first, his weak cries breaking Elizabeth's heart, but she persisted with steady hands. Great Cloud watched intently, his massive hands clenched into fists as he witnessed his son's distress, every muscle in his body taut with the effort of not interfering. Elizabeth could feel his anxiety, his barely controlled fear, but she forced herself to concentrate solely on her task. "Talk to him," Elizabeth said softly, without looking up from her work. "Let him hear his father's voice. It will comfort him." Great Cloud seemed surprised by the request, but after a moment's hesitation, he began to speak in Cheyenne, his deep voice filling the lodge with words Elizabeth could not fully understand, but whose meaning was unmistakable. He was telling his son about his mother, about her beauty and strength, about the love that had created him. He was promising the child a future, describing the warrior he would become, the honor he would bring to their people. As Great Cloud spoke, Elizabeth continued her delicate work. She cleared as much of the obstruction as she could reach, then carefully positioned the hollow reed. This was the most dangerous part, the moment that could either save the child or condemn him. She had performed this procedure before, creating a temporary airway for infants whose natural passages were blocked, but never under such primitive conditions, never with so many hostile eyes watching her every move. She said a silent prayer and gently inserted the reed, creating a clear pathway for air to reach the baby's lungs. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The infant's face remained contorted, his tiny body rigid with effort. Elizabeth's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might burst from her chest. Then, suddenly, the child drew in a deep, full breath. His chest expanded properly for the first time since his birth, and the terrible rasping sound that had filled the lodge began to ease. Another breath followed, then another, each one smoother and more natural than the last. The bluish tinge started to fade from his skin, replaced by a healthier pink tone. Great Cloud made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, his eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "He breathes," he whispered in English, then repeated it in Cheyenne, louder. "He breathes." The medicine man moved closer, his weathered face transformed by wonder, as he observed the change in the infant. The baby's cries, when they came now, were stronger, more vigorous, the cries of a child fighting to live rather than the weak mewling of one slipping away. "The reed must stay in place for now," Elizabeth explained, her own voice shaking with relief and exhaustion. "His natural airway needs time to heal and strengthen. I will need to monitor him constantly, clear any new accumulation, and gradually help him learn to breathe on his own without the reed's assistance. You will stay here in my lodge," Great Cloud said, and it was not a question but a statement. "You will care for my son until he is fully healed." Elizabeth met his eyes, those dark eyes that now held something beyond pain and desperation. There was gratitude there, yes, but also a dawning respect, and something else she could not quite name. "Yes," she agreed quietly, "I will stay." The medicine man spoke rapidly in Cheyenne to Great Cloud, and Elizabeth caught enough to understand that he was explaining her needs. Within minutes, her few possessions from the prison lodge were brought to Great Cloud's home, and a space was prepared for her near the fire, close to where the baby would sleep. Over the following days, Elizabeth barely left the infant's side. She monitored his breathing constantly, clearing his airway when necessary and gradually teaching his small body the rhythm it needed to sustain life independently. Great Cloud remained present as well, his imposing figure a constant shadow in the lodge. He watched Elizabeth work with an intensity that might have unnerved her under different circumstances, but she came to understand that he was not watching her with suspicion. He was learning, absorbing every technique, every gentle touch, every careful procedure she performed. "Why did you become a medicine woman?" Great Cloud asked one evening as Elizabeth tended to his son. The baby was sleeping peacefully, his breathing steadier than it had been since his birth, though still aided by the reed. Elizabeth looked up, surprised by the personal question. In the days since she had begun treating the child, their conversations had been limited to matters of the infant's care. "My younger brother died when I was 12 years old," she said softly, the old pain still present in her voice. "He had a fever that would not break. The doctors tried everything, but nothing helped. I watched him slip away over 3 terrible days, and I felt so helpless. I promised myself then that I would learn everything I could about healing, that I would save others from the pain my family endured. Great Cloud was silent for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I understand this kind of loss. My wife, Hangwi Changnongpa, her name meant 2 moons. We had loved each other since we were children. When she told me she carried our child, I thought the Great Spirit had blessed us beyond measure. I never imagined I would have to choose between them. You did not choose, Elizabeth said gently. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite all our knowledge and prayers, we cannot control what happens. Your wife gave her life so your son could have his. That was her choice, her final gift to you both. The medicine man did everything he knew to do. Great Cloud continued, his voice thick with emotion. But her bleeding would not stop. She held our son once, looked into his face, and then she was gone. I have been angry, so angry at the world, at the white men who push us from our lands, at the Great Spirit for taking her from me. But watching you save my son, seeing your dedication to healing even when you are a prisoner among people you do not know, I remember that there is more to life than anger and grief. Elizabeth felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had spent weeks as a captive, fearing for her life, uncertain if she would ever see her home again. But in this moment, sitting in the warm glow of the fire with a grieving warrior and his struggling infant, she felt a connection that transcended the boundaries of culture and conflict. "May I ask you something?" Elizabeth ventured after a pause. "How did you learn to speak English so well?" A ghost of a smile touched Great Cloud's lips, the first she had seen from him. "When I was young, before the conflicts became so bitter, I spent time at a mission school. The priests taught me to read and write in your language. I thought this knowledge would help me protect my people, help me understand the thinking of those who sought to control us. I never imagined I would use it to speak with a white medicine woman who would save my son's life." "What is your name in English?" Elizabeth asked. "I know Great Cloud, but is there more?" "I am called Makpia Thanka, Great Cloud, because I was born during a terrible storm that brought massive clouds that covered the entire sky. Some of my people also call me Thathanka Wangbli, which means buffalo eagle, for I am said to have the strength of the buffalo and the vision of the eagle. But you may call me by my mission school name if you wish. The priests called me Samuel." "Samuel," Elizabeth repeated softly, testing the name. "I am Elizabeth. Elizabeth Morgan." "Elizabeth," he said, and the way he spoke her name with careful pronunciation and unexpected warmth sent an unfamiliar flutter through her chest. "You have given my son a chance at life. This is a debt I can never fully repay." "I did not do it for repayment," Elizabeth replied, looking down at the sleeping infant. "I did it because it was right, because he deserved a chance to live and grow and know his father's love." As the days continued to pass, the baby's condition steadily improved. His natural airway grew stronger, and Elizabeth was able to gradually reduce his dependence on the reed. She taught Great Cloud, and the medicine man as well, how to recognize signs of respiratory distress and how to respond appropriately. The 3 of them formed an unlikely team, united by their common goal of ensuring the child's survival. Elizabeth also began to see more of the village and its people. The women, initially suspicious and distant, started to warm to her presence. They saw how she cared for their leader's son with the same dedication they would show to their own children. Some brought her food, others offered her warmer clothing as the autumn air grew colder. The children, naturally curious, would peek into the lodge to watch her work, their eyes wide with fascination. One afternoon, Great Cloud's sister, a woman named Hothankala, meaning little voice, came to the lodge. She was perhaps 25 years old, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. She spoke some English, having learned from her brother, and she offered to help Elizabeth with the daily care of the infant. "My brother has not smiled since 2 moons died," Hothankala said quietly as they worked together to clean the baby. "But I see something changing in him now. He looks at you with respect, with trust. This is good. Our people need him to heal, to lead us again with strength and wisdom." Elizabeth felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I am only doing what any healer would do." "No," Hothankala said firmly. "You are doing what few would do. You could have remained silent, could have let the child die, and perhaps earned your freedom more quickly. Instead, you risked everything to save him. This speaks of your character, of your heart. That evening, as Elizabeth sat feeding the baby with a cloth soaked in warm broth, Great Cloud approached her with something in his hands. "The child grows stronger every day because of you," he said. "I think it is time he received his name." Elizabeth looked up, surprised and honored. "What will you call him?" "I will call him Wiyuthapi Wachangshicha, which means guiding star. When he was struggling to breathe, when I thought I would lose him as I lost his mother, you appeared like a star in the darkness, guiding us toward hope. And I will give him a second name, an English name, so that he may walk in both worlds as his father has done. I will call him Daniel, which your Bible says means God is my judge. For only the Great Spirit could have brought you to us at the moment we needed you most." Tears spilled down Elizabeth's cheeks as she looked at the tiny face of Daniel, little Wiyuthapi Wachangshicha, who was now breathing easily, his small features relaxed in peaceful sleep. "It is a beautiful name," she whispered. "He will grow to be worthy of it." Great Cloud knelt beside her, his presence warm and solid. "You weep," he observed gently. "I weep because I am happy," Elizabeth explained, wiping at her tears. "Because this child lives, because he has a name and a future, because despite all the hatred and violence between our peoples, we have found a way to come together for something good." "Elizabeth," Great Cloud said her name softly, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was not gratitude anymore, not simple respect. It was something deeper, something that both frightened and excited her. "You are not a prisoner here anymore. You have earned your freedom through your actions, through saving my son's life. You may leave whenever you wish. I will provide you with a horse, supplies, and safe passage to the nearest fort." Elizabeth's heart clenched at his words. She should feel relief, should be eager to accept this offer and return to the world she knew. But instead, she felt an unexpected reluctance, a strange pulling in her chest at the thought of leaving this lodge, this child, this man who had somehow become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "What if I am not ready to leave?" she asked quietly. Great Cloud's expression shifted at her words, surprise and something warmer flickering across his strong features. The firelight cast dancing shadows on his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the intensity in his dark eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the lodge, the soft breathing of the sleeping infant and the gentle crackle of the fire. "You would choose to stay?" he asked finally, his voice low and careful, as though he feared breaking whatever fragile understanding was forming between them. "You would remain here, among people you do not know in a world so different from your own." Elizabeth looked down at little Daniel in her arms, then back up at Great Cloud. "I have grown to care for this child, for his well-being. He still needs monitoring, still requires careful attention, as his body learns to breathe fully on its own. And beyond that, I find myself drawn to the life here, to the people who have begun to accept me despite everything that divides us. I do not wish to leave, not yet." The truth was more complex than she could fully articulate. Yes, she cared deeply for the infant whose life she had saved, but there was more to her reluctance than medical responsibility. Over the past weeks, she had witnessed a way of life that, while harsh and unfamiliar, held a beauty and authenticity she had never encountered in Boston's rigid society. The Cheyenne people lived in harmony with the land, their traditions woven through every aspect of daily existence. They faced tremendous hardship, pushed from their ancestral territories by the relentless expansion of white settlement, yet they maintained their dignity and their culture with fierce determination. And then there was Great Cloud himself, this man who had lost so much, who carried the weight of his people's survival on his broad shoulders, who had shown her a vulnerability and strength that moved her in ways she had never experienced. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that transcended language and culture. He did not see her as merely a woman, limited by her gender as her colleagues in Boston had, but as a healer, a person of knowledge and skill worthy of respect. "Then you will stay," Great Cloud said, and the relief in his voice was unmistakable. "You will stay as an honored guest, as Daniel's healer, and as a member of this village. No one will harm you or treat you with disrespect. This, I promise." Over the following weeks, Elizabeth settled into a new rhythm of life. She continued to care for Daniel, monitoring his progress as he grew stronger each day. The reed was eventually removed completely, and the infant's natural airways functioned perfectly on their own. His lungs expanded fully with each breath, and his cries became the robust sounds of a healthy baby demanding attention and nourishment. Great Cloud proved to be an attentive father, despite his responsibilities as leader. He would hold his son for hours, speaking to him in Cheyenne, telling him stories of his mother and of the proud lineage from which he descended. Elizabeth watched these interactions with a warmth spreading through her chest, touched by the tenderness this powerful warrior showed his child. As Daniel's immediate medical crisis passed, Elizabeth found herself with more freedom to explore the village and interact with its inhabitants. The women taught her their crafts, showing her how to tan hides, how to create intricate beadwork, and how to prepare traditional foods. She, in turn, shared her medical knowledge, treating various ailments and injuries that arose within the community. She set broken bones, treated fevers, and delivered 2 babies, both healthy and strong. The medicine man, whose name she learned was Wahitika Wichasha, meaning brave man, became her unlikely ally and friend. He recognized that her knowledge complemented his own, rather than threatening it, and they would spend hours discussing treatments and remedies, finding common ground between their different medical traditions. She learned about the healing properties of local plants and herbs, while he showed interest in her understanding of anatomy and physiology. But it was her relationship with Great Cloud that underwent the most profound transformation. They spent long evenings together in his lodge, talking about everything from their different childhoods to their hopes for the future. He told her about the injustices his people had suffered, the broken treaties and false promises that had driven them to defend their lands through warfare. She shared her own frustrations with a society that viewed women as incapable of serious intellectual pursuit, that had placed countless obstacles in her path as she fought for her medical education. "Your people and mine are not so different," Great Cloud observed one night as they sat by the fire, Daniel sleeping peacefully in a cradleboard nearby. "We both fight against those who would limit us, who would deny us our right to live as we choose. Perhaps that is why I feel so at home here," Elizabeth replied, surprising herself with the admission. "In Boston, I was constantly battling to prove my worth, to demonstrate that a woman could be as skilled a physician as any man. Here you simply accept my abilities without question. You judge me by my actions, not by my gender. Among my people, women hold great power," Great Cloud explained. "They own the lodges. They make crucial decisions about the welfare of our families. A man who does not respect the wisdom of women is a fool. When I look at you, Elizabeth, I see strength and intelligence, courage and compassion. I see a woman who embodies the best qualities a person can possess." His words sent warmth flooding through her, and she found herself unable to meet his intense gaze. Something was growing between them, something that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling in love with this man, this warrior from a world so different from her own, and she suspected he felt the same pull toward her. The tension came to a head on a cold November evening. Snow had begun to fall, the first of the approaching winter, and the village prepared for the harsh months ahead. Elizabeth had been helping the women preserve meat and gather the last of the autumn's wild plants, so when a rider came thundering into the village, his horse lathered with sweat despite the freezing temperature. "Soldiers," the scout reported urgently, as warriors gathered around him. "A large patrol 2 days' ride to the east. They are searching for something, asking questions at every Cheyenne camp they encounter." Elizabeth's blood ran cold. She knew what they were searching for. Her disappearance had not gone unnoticed. The military would be looking for her, and they would not rest until they found her or confirmed her death. She stood frozen in the gathering crowd, her mind racing with the implications. Great Cloud's eyes found hers across the assembled villagers, and she saw the same realization dawn on his face. The fragile peace they had built, the connection that had grown between them, was about to be tested in the most severe way possible. That night, the village council convened in the ceremonial lodge. Elizabeth was not invited to attend, But Hothankala, Great Cloud's sister, came to sit with her and Daniel, offering quiet support as they waited for the council's decision. "What will they do?" Elizabeth asked, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. "Will they send me away to protect the village?" "My brother will not send you away," Hothankala said with certainty. "But the council may insist on it. The soldiers bring danger. If they discover you are here, they may attack, and many could die. The council must think of the whole village, especially the women and children." Hours passed before Great Cloud finally returned to his lodge. His face was grave, lines of stress and exhaustion etched around his eyes and mouth. He dismissed his sister with a gentle word, then turned to face Elizabeth. "The council has decided," he said heavily. "They say you must leave before the soldiers arrive. They fear a battle that could destroy our village, kill our people. They understand what you have done for Daniel, for all of us, but they believe your presence puts everyone at risk." Elizabeth had known this was coming, had tried to prepare herself for it, but the actual words still felt like a physical blow. "I understand," she managed to say, though her voice broke on the words. "When must I go?" "Tomorrow at dawn," Great Cloud replied. He moved closer, his large hands reaching out to grasp her shoulders gently. "Elizabeth, I do not want you to go. These past weeks with you they have brought light back into my life, when I thought I would dwell only in darkness. You saved my son, yes, but you have done so much more. You have shown me that healing is possible, that understanding can exist between our peoples despite all the hatred and violence." Tears spilled down Elizabeth's cheeks. "Samuel," she whispered, using his mission name, the name that had become intimate between them. "I do not want to leave either. I have found something here, something I never knew I was searching for. I have found purpose and acceptance. And I have found—" She hesitated, then pushed forward with courage born of desperation. "I have found love. I love you. I love your son. I love the life I have built here." Great Cloud's eyes widened, then filled with an emotion so powerful it took her breath away. "Elizabeth," he breathed, pulling her into his arms. "My heart has belonged to you since the moment you knelt beside me and took my dying son into your hands. You are brave and beautiful, wise and kind. You are everything I could want in a partner, in a mother for my child. But how can we be together when the world conspires to tear us apart?" They held each other tightly, Elizabeth's tears soaking into his buckskin shirt. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white silence. Inside the lodge, Daniel began to fuss, and they separated reluctantly, Elizabeth moving to tend to the baby while Great Cloud watched with anguish written across his face. As Elizabeth fed and soothed the infant, her mind worked frantically. There had to be a solution, some way to protect both the village and preserve what she and Great Cloud had found together. An idea began to form, risky and uncertain, but perhaps their only chance. "What if I go to meet the soldiers?" she said suddenly, looking up at Great Cloud. "What if I go to them willingly before they reach the village and tell them that I was treated well, that I wish to remain here of my own free will?" Great Cloud shook his head immediately. "They will not believe you. They will think you have been forced to say these things or that you have lost your mind. And even if they did believe you, they would still take you away. A white woman cannot simply choose to live among the Cheyenne. Your society would never accept it." "Then what if we leave together?" Elizabeth pressed, the idea gaining momentum in her mind. "You and Daniel and me. We could go somewhere far from here, somewhere neither the army nor the tribal councils can dictate our lives. I have heard of communities in the northern territories, places where people of different backgrounds live together in peace." "You would give up your people entirely?" Great Cloud asked, his voice filled with wonder and doubt. "You would become an outcast from your own society, face judgment and condemnation, all to be with me?" "I would," Elizabeth said with absolute certainty. "I have already been an outcast in my own way, fighting against the limitations my society placed on me. At least if I am with you, I would be choosing my own path, living according to my own values. And you, would you leave your people, your responsibilities as their leader?" Great Cloud was silent for a long time, his expression torn between desire and duty. Finally he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "My people need me, this is true. But they also need hope, need to see that a different future is possible. Perhaps by choosing this path, by showing that love can bridge the divide between our worlds, I give them something more valuable than my presence as their war leader. They talked through the night, planning and preparing. Great Cloud would speak to the council again, would name his younger brother, a capable warrior named Hemaheha, meaning Little Elk, as the new leader. He would explain his decision, would ask for their understanding and blessing. Elizabeth would write a letter to be delivered to the fort, explaining that she had survived, that she was well, and that she was choosing a new life of her own free will. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Great Cloud called for an emergency council meeting. Elizabeth waited in the lodge with Daniel, her heart pounding with anxiety and hope. The meeting was contentious. She could hear raised voices even from a distance. Many warriors protested Great Cloud's decision to step down, arguing that the village needed his strength and wisdom now more than ever. Others questioned whether he was thinking clearly, whether his judgment had been compromised by his feelings for the white medicine woman. But Great Cloud stood firm. He spoke of his son's need for a stable, peaceful life, of his own need to heal from the grief that had consumed him. He reminded them that Little Elk was young but capable, trained by Great Cloud himself in the ways of leadership. And he spoke of love, of the transformative power of connection that transcends the boundaries humans create. Finally, the medicine man, Wahitika Wichasha, spoke up. Great Cloud has given much to this village, he said, his old voice carrying authority. He has led us through battles, has negotiated with our enemies, has put the needs of his people above his own desires time and again. Now he asks for our blessing to choose his own path, to seek happiness with the woman who saved his son's life. Can we, in good conscience, deny him this after all he has sacrificed? The silence that followed Wahitika Wichasha's words was heavy with contemplation. Elizabeth stood outside the ceremonial lodge now, having been summoned by Great Cloud. The entire village had gathered, their faces reflecting the gravity of the moment. Women held their children close, warriors stood with arms crossed, and elders conferred in hushed whispers. The future of their leader hung in the balance, and with it, the future of Elizabeth's heart. Little Elk stepped forward from the circle of warriors. He was perhaps 25 years old, tall and strong like his older brother, but with softer features that still held traces of youth. My brother has been both father and leader to me since our own father fell in battle 10 winters ago, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of what was being asked of him. He taught me to hunt, to fight, to think of the people before myself. If he believes I am ready to lead, then I will accept this responsibility with humility and dedication. And if he has found love and peace with the medicine woman who saved his son, who are we to stand in the way of the happiness he deserves? Hothankala moved to stand beside Elizabeth, taking her hand in a gesture of solidarity. This woman came to us as a captive, an enemy, she said loudly enough for all to hear. But she proved herself through her actions, through her courage and her compassion. She saved my nephew's life when our own medicine could not. She has treated our sick and injured, has learned our ways, and has shown respect for our traditions. She does not seek to change my brother or pull him away from who he is. Instead, she accepts him fully, loves him completely. Is this not the kind of partnership we should celebrate? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, though some faces remained skeptical. An older warrior, scarred from many battles, spoke up. What of the soldiers who search for her? Even if Great Cloud leaves with her, they may still come here seeking answers. They may bring violence to our village. I will go to them, Elizabeth said, her voice clear and strong despite her racing heart. Before we leave, I will ride to meet the patrol and speak with them directly. I will tell them the truth, that I am alive and well, and that I choose to leave of my own free will. I will make it clear that the Cheyenne people treated me with honor once I proved myself, and that any attack on this village would be unjust and unprovoked. Great Cloud moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. I know this decision causes concern and uncertainty, he addressed his people. I know many of you question whether I am thinking clearly, whether my grief and my feelings have clouded my judgment. But I ask you to trust that I am making this choice with full awareness of its implications. I love Elizabeth with all my heart, and I love my son. I want to give Daniel a chance to grow up in a world where he is not defined by conflict and war, where he can embrace both sides of his heritage without shame or fear. And I want to build a life with the woman who brought light back into my darkness." The medicine man raised his hand, calling for silence. "I have lived many seasons and have witnessed much," he said. "I have seen love conquer hatred, have seen enemies become allies, and have seen miracles that defy explanation. What Elizabeth did for young Daniel was such a miracle. The Great Spirit brought her to us at the exact moment we needed her, and I believe there is purpose in this. Perhaps Great Cloud and Elizabeth are meant to walk a different path, to show both our peoples that another way is possible. I say we give them our blessing." One by one, members of the council began to nod their agreement. It was not unanimous, and Elizabeth could see the reservation in some eyes, but the majority had spoken. Great Cloud would be released from his duties as war leader, and Little Elk would take his place. The transition would happen immediately, to give the new leader time to establish his authority before the harsh winter fully set in. The following hours passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Great Cloud formally transferred leadership to his brother in a ceremony that was both solemn and celebratory. Warriors pledged their loyalty to Little Elk, and Great Cloud offered counsel and wisdom to guide the young leader through the challenges ahead. Women prepared supplies for the journey, packing dried meat, warm furs, and medicine pouches filled with healing herbs. Elizabeth wrote her letter to the military command at Fort Kearney, carefully crafting each word to convey her safety and her choice, without prompting retaliation against the Cheyenne village. She explained her capture, her treatment as a prisoner, and how everything had changed when she saved the leader's infant son. She made it clear that she was leaving of her own volition, that she had found a new life and a new purpose, and that she asked only to be left in peace to pursue her own happiness. As the sun reached its zenith, Elizabeth prepared for the most difficult part of her plan. She would ride out alone to meet the approaching patrol, deliver her letter, and speak with the commanding officer face to face. Great Cloud wanted to accompany her, but they both knew his presence would only complicate matters and potentially provoke violence. "I will wait for you at the Canyon of Red Rocks, 2 days' ride to the west," Great Cloud said as he helped her mount the sturdy mare the village had provided. "If you do not come within 3 days, I will know something has gone wrong and I will find a way to reach you." Elizabeth looked down at him, her heart swelling with love for this man who had become everything to her. "I will come to you," she promised. "Nothing will keep me from you and Daniel. We will build our new life together and we will be happy." He reached up and pulled her down for a fierce kiss, pouring all his love and fear and hope into that single moment of connection. When they separated, both had tears in their eyes. Elizabeth took one last look at the village that had become her home, at the people who had accepted her despite every reason not to, and then she turned her horse toward the east and rode away. The journey to intercept the patrol took a full day. Elizabeth rode through landscapes of breathtaking beauty, across rolling prairies still dusted with snow, past groves of cottonwood trees stripped bare by autumn's passage. She thought about everything that had happened since her capture, how her life had been completely transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She had left Boston seeking adventure and purpose, hoping to make a difference through her medical skills. She had found so much more than that. She had found love, belonging, and a strength within herself she had not known she possessed. As the sun began to set on the second day, she spotted the patrol in the distance. A column of blue-uniformed soldiers, perhaps 30 strong, making camp in a shallow valley. Elizabeth took a deep breath, steadied her nerves, and rode forward to meet them. The sentries spotted her immediately, and within minutes she was surrounded by soldiers, their rifles trained on her despite her obvious lack of threat. A gruff officer, his face weathered by years on the frontier, pushed through the circle. "Who are you, and what are you doing out here alone?" he demanded. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Morgan," she said clearly. "I believe you have been searching for me." The effect of her words was immediate. The officer's eyes widened in shock, and urgent orders were shouted. Within moments, she was escorted to the command tent, where a colonel sat reviewing maps by lamplight. He rose quickly when she entered, his expression a mixture of relief and confusion. "Dr. Morgan, we had feared you were dead," Colonel Harrison said, studying her intently. "Your convoy was attacked nearly 3 months ago. We found the bodies of your military escort, but no trace of you. We assumed the Cheyenne had either killed you or taken you captive." "I was taken captive initially," Elizabeth confirmed, "but circumstances changed. I saved the life of the leader's infant son, and in doing so, earned my freedom and the respect of the village. I have been living among the Cheyenne people, learning from them, and providing medical care to their community." Colonel Harrison's expression hardened. "You are telling me you have been free to leave but chose to remain with the savages who murdered your escort?" Elizabeth felt anger flash through her at his characterization, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I am telling you that I found purpose and belonging among people who are not savages, but human beings fighting desperately to preserve their way of life against overwhelming odds. I am also telling you that I have fallen in love and wish to build a new life outside the constraints of both our societies." "That is impossible," the colonel said flatly. "You are a white woman, an educated physician. You cannot simply throw away your life to live like a primitive." "With all due respect, Colonel, that is exactly what I can and will do," Elizabeth replied, her voice firm. "I am not asking for your permission or your approval. I am simply informing you of my decision and asking that you leave the Cheyenne village in peace. They have done nothing wrong. They treated me with honor and respect once I proved myself worthy of it. Any attack on them would be unjust." The colonel studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "Dr. Morgan, I cannot force you to return to civilization if you are truly determined to leave it. But I must warn you that the life you are choosing will be extraordinarily difficult. You will be shunned by white society, viewed with suspicion by the tribes, and caught between two worlds that are at war with each other." "I understand the challenges," Elizabeth said quietly, "but I would rather face those challenges with the man I love than live a safe, conventional life without him." Colonel Harrison shook his head in bewilderment, but something in his eyes suggested a grudging respect. "Very well. I will report that you were found alive and well, that you were not held against your will, and that you have chosen to pursue a different path. I will recommend that no action be taken against the Cheyenne village that held you, as they ultimately did you no harm. But understand this, Dr. Morgan. Once you make this choice, there is no going back. You will be giving up everything your old life offered." "I know," Elizabeth said, "and I accept that completely." She stayed with the patrol that night, knowing it would be her last contact with the world she was leaving behind. The soldiers treated her with a mixture of respect and incomprehension, unable to fathom why an educated woman would choose such a path. In the morning, she wrote brief letters to her parents, trying to explain her decision in a way they might someday understand, asking for their forgiveness and their blessing, even if they could not approve. Then, as the sun rose over the prairie, Elizabeth mounted her horse once more and turned west, toward the canyon of red rocks where Great Cloud waited for her. She did not look back. The 2-day journey to the canyon passed in a haze of anticipation and nervous energy. Elizabeth pushed her mare hard, eager to reunite with the man she loved and begin their new life together. As she approached the towering red rock formations that marked their meeting place, her heart began to race. And there, at the entrance to the canyon, she saw him. Great Cloud stood beside a small fire, Daniel strapped to his back in a cradle board, his eyes scanning the horizon. When he spotted her, his entire face transformed with joy and relief. He ran forward to meet her as she dismounted, catching her up in his arms and spinning her around. "You came," he breathed against her hair. "I knew you would, but still I feared." "Nothing could keep me from you," Elizabeth said, pulling back to look into his eyes. "I have made my choice, Samuel. I have chosen you, chosen us, chosen the life we will build together." They held each other for a long moment. Then Great Cloud gently removed Daniel from his back and placed the baby in Elizabeth's arms. The infant, now healthy and thriving, looked up at her with bright, curious eyes and gave a gummy smile that melted her heart completely. "Our family," Great Cloud said softly, wrapping his arms around both of them. "This is our family now, and we will face whatever comes together." They traveled north for many weeks, moving slowly to accommodate the baby and stopping frequently to rest and hunt. Great Cloud taught Elizabeth wilderness skills she had never imagined needing, showing her how to track game, how to read the land, and how to survive in the harsh frontier environment. Elizabeth shared stories from her life in Boston, taught Great Cloud more complex English, and continued to care for Daniel's health and development. As winter deepened, they reached the northern territories Great Cloud had heard about from traders and scouts. Here, in the rugged mountains and dense forests, far from the conflicts raging on the plains, they found a small settlement of people who had also chosen to live outside the bounds of conventional society. There were former trappers and traders, native people from various tribes, and a handful of others who, like Elizabeth and Great Cloud, had crossed cultural boundaries for love. The settlement welcomed them, asking few questions and offering the support of a community that understood the challenges of choosing an unconventional path. Great Cloud built them a sturdy cabin, combining construction techniques from both his culture and what he had learned at the mission school. Elizabeth established a small medical practice, treating the ailments and injuries of their neighbors, and continuing to blend her formal training with the traditional healing knowledge Great Cloud and the medicine man had shared with her. As spring arrived, bringing new life to the land, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant. The joy this news brought was tempered by the practical concerns of bringing a child into their unconventional life, but Great Cloud held her close and whispered promises of protection and love. "Our children will be blessed," he told her. "They will know both worlds, will carry the best of both our peoples in their hearts. They will grow up understanding that love is stronger than hatred, that understanding can overcome fear, and that courage means choosing your own path even when the world tells you it is wrong." On a warm summer evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Elizabeth and Great Cloud stood together outside their cabin. Daniel, now a year old and walking steadily, played at their feet, laughing with pure joy as he chased a butterfly. Elizabeth's hand rested on her growing belly, feeling the flutter of new life within. "Are you happy?" Great Cloud asked, pulling her close against his side. Elizabeth looked up at the man who had become her everything, the love and partner and father to her children. She thought about the life she had left behind, the career she had sacrificed, and the family who might never understand her choice. And then she thought about what she had gained, a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible, a sense of purpose and belonging that transcended cultural boundaries, and a future full of hope and possibility. "I am happy," she said with absolute certainty. "I'm exactly where I belong, with exactly who I am meant to be with. Whatever challenges we face, we will face them together, and that makes all the difference." Great Cloud kissed her tenderly as the sun completed its descent, painting the sky in its final glorious colors. Behind them, their cabin stood solid and welcoming, smoke rising from its chimney into the clear evening air. Daniel's laughter rang out like music, a sound of pure innocence and joy, and within Elizabeth their second child grew, a symbol of the love that had brought two worlds together. They had chosen a difficult path, one that would require constant courage and commitment. They would face judgment from both their former communities, would struggle against prejudice and misunderstanding, but they would face it together, bound by a love that had overcome capture and conflict, grief and fear, cultural divides and societal expectations. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Elizabeth and Great Cloud gathered their small family and went inside their home. The fire burned warm and bright. Daniel settled into sleep in his father's arms, and Elizabeth leaned against her husband's strong shoulder, feeling complete and at peace. They had found their happy ending not in the world they had known, but in the world they had chosen to create together, a world where love was stronger than hatred, where healing could bridge any divide, and where two people from different worlds could build a life filled with hope, purpose, and enduring joy. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and their love deepened, they would become a living testament to the power of choosing courage over fear, understanding over prejudice, and love over all the forces that sought to keep people apart. Their children would grow strong and proud, carrying within them the best of both cultures, and the settlement around them would thrive as a beacon of what was possible when people chose connection over conflict. The child of the mourning Cheyenne leader had indeed breathed calmly once the white prisoner medicine woman touched him, but that touch had done so much more than save a single life. It had bridged two worlds, healed two broken hearts, and created a love story that would endure through all the challenges and triumphs the future would bring. This was their ending, and their beginning, and it was everything they had dreamed it could be.